Welcome to the British Food History Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Neil Buttery, food historian and chef. My guest today is Alex Bamji, Assistant Professor of Early Modern History at the University of Leeds. And we are talking about a only very recently discovered treatise on cheese written in the early modern period, i.e. 16th to 17th century. It's very exciting and I'm very glad Alex spared the time to talk with me about this wonderful handwritten manuscript. I'll let you know my news at the end of the episode except for this headline. My book, Need to Know, is now available as an audiobook. You can get hold of it from wherever you get audiobooks, such as Audible, Spotify, etc. I've narrated it too. It was recorded at Media City in Salford, a stone's throw away from my home in Levenshulme, Manchester. There was a massive storm outside, not that you can hear it, and it was quite surreal reading the whole book out loud whilst facing a wall in a soundproofed booth. But if you are someone who prefers to consume their books hourly, please do check it out. There's a sample that you can listen to on YouTube via Google Books. There's a link in the show notes. I've got more news at the end of the episode, new blog posts, and exciting, who my guest is going to be at the Serve It Forth Food History Festival in October. Season 9 of the podcast is sponsored by Fruit Pig, Britain's last remaining commercial craft producer of fresh blood black puddings. Matthew Cockin and Grant Harper, who are Fruit Pig, put a huge amount of care and attention into harvesting fresh blood to create a very delicious black pudding. Also available are their gluten-free black puddings, their delicious hog's pudding, and their traditional and also delicious haggis. They also make bacon and sell some great British charcuterie. Visit fruitpig.co.uk for more details and to find your stockist and to access the shop. And Grant and Matthew have very kindly given listeners to the podcast a unique special offer, 10% off your order until the end of October 2025. Use the offer code FOODHIS. It's all one word, FOODHIS, capital F please. Use it at the checkout. Please support them if you can. Their products are fantastic. Alright, let's get started. Yes, I am talking with Alex Bamji, Assistant Professor of Early Modern History at the University of Leeds, about a rare treatise on cheese dating back to the early modern period, author unknown. But whoever they are, they're very knowledgeable and enthusiastic about cheese, and it's pretty comprehensive. Alex and I met up at the Brotherton Library, part of Leeds University, which is home to a fantastic collection of cookery books and manuscripts. It was very exciting to be there. In fact, I think we need an episode all about that library, actually. I will add it to my list. Alex and I talk about cheese, health, and humoral theory, what makes a good cheese, the early modern cheese landscape, cheese as a cure for gout, and cheese haters, plus many other things. Those listening to the Secret Podcast, you get a bit extra, covering why cow's milk is the best milk, and whether we get a handle on where the microbes are coming from. But there'll also be, in the next couple of days anyway, a blog post for subscribers all about junkets with a recipe. So keep an eye out for that. But anyway, right now, please do enjoy a rare early modern cheese manuscript with Alex Bamji. Welcome to the podcast, Alex. I'm very excited to talk to you today. Before we get started talking about this amazing manuscript, could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your role at Leeds University?
Of course. My name's Alex Bamji and I'm Associate Professor of Early Modern History. I'm also the Director of the Leeds Arts and Humanities Research Institute. So essentially, my role at the university is to be a historian, to do research into history, especially the period from the 16th to the 18th century. And I also have a role in research development more broadly.
I see. Are you the go-to person for obscure manuscripts?
Well, it seems so. And I'm very happy to be that person.
Very good. Well, tell us about this manuscript because it's very exciting.
It is really exciting manuscript. So this is a manuscript that came to the university 2 years ago in 2023. It came up at auction, which is very exciting. And the university thought it'd be a wonderful thing to get it hands on because it relates to a lot of the other things that we have in our collection here in the library.
Well, yeah, what a collection.
At the University of Leeds, we have a number of special collections in our cultural collections and galleries. And one of them is the cookery collection. And that has its origins back a number of decades when someone gave their own collection of historic recipe books and cookery books to the university, books and manuscripts dating back to the 15th century. And since then, the university's been building on that collection when it gets an opportunity. So we've got this wonderful collection of things, both handwritten, manuscripts, and things that were printed, including several hundred years ago.
And this one's a handwritten manuscript.
That's right, yes.
Tudor.
Well, yes, but
Just about ish. Oh, okay.
Well, it's a great question. The reason I hesitate on that is because we don't know the exact date of this manuscript, and different people who've looked at it have taken slightly different views. And I do think it is something that will be possible to pin down, but needs a little bit more research, because it doesn't have the date written in it. So all we can do to work out the date is look at the content and also to look at the handwriting.
Yes,
and
handwriting helps.
Think about what might be the best date. And different people have had different views ranging from about 1580 through to about 1625.
So we're talking late Tudor, early Stuart.
Yes.
Elizabeth I, James I/6.
Yes.
Just to give people a grounding point there if they're not sure of what we're talking about.
Yes.
Big roughs.
Yes. Definitely big roughs.
Big roughs.
Yes.
Excellent. Is the writing impossible to read? Because that's a dead giveaway. It's Tudor, in my experience.
Well, this is one of the things that I found most interesting when I first looked at the manuscript. The writing is incredibly neat.
Is it?
Yes, which to me, as someone who works a lot with manuscripts, suggests that someone may have done a first draft and then written out this nice, tidy copy. So it's very neat. And even though if you're not familiar with the hand, it might be quite hard to read. Yeah. If you do have that expertise, it is fairly straightforward to read.
What I should say, or what I should ask is, what is the pamphlet about? What's the title of the pamphlet?
So the pamphlet its full title, it's got a very long title,
Always.
is A Pamphlet Compiled of Cheese Containing the Differences, Nature, Qualities and Goodness of the Same. I tend to just call it the pamphlet or the cheese pamphlet.
Yes, that's what I've been calling it too. Well, apart from yourself, who else has been working on the pamphlet? And I guess there's quite a lot of stuff going on around it too.
Lots of people who've been really interested in it, but one of the really exciting things is that Ruth Bramley, who's a reenactor based at Kentwell Hall, has done a transcription of this. And so she's made a nice, clean, typed up copy, which of course makes it much easier for everyone to look at it and sort of think about what this content means.
Yes, well, that's what I use. I didn't sit reading the original pamphlet, that's for sure.
Well, one thing I would say is if you do want to look at the original, we've got a fantastic digital copy of it on the University Library website. So you can actually see exactly what the original pages look like if you want to, but you can't actually hold it and get a sense of the size unless you actually come to the university.
You get so much by looking at the actual manuscript.
Yes.
Even if you know all the words contained in there,
yes,
there's always added value.
Well, exactly that, including looking at the hand and whether it's neat and tidy and the clues that you can get from that about the manuscript.
Yes, and certainly from the point of view of cooking, are there gravy stains or a complete lack of, because that's telling you how it was used as well. So it's always important.
Yeah, well, we might need to do a bit of a gravy stain check, but it's pretty clean. It's a pretty clean manuscript. Yeah, it's been well looked after.
There's a lot to take apart in this book. It was quite hard writing questions because everything's interconnected. And it was kind of hard to find a way in, almost. But maybe the best way to go in there is think about cheese and health. Obviously, food and health is always a thing. It's always been a thing. And it seems to be something that he really, I'm saying he. Are we assuming he's a he?
We are assuming, we're assuming he's a he.
Okay.
We don't know who the author is. But again, all the clues suggest that it was written by a man, someone who was really passionate about cheese. someone who's obviously quite educated. You can sort of get a sense of that from what he writes about, the fact that
very well read.
Yes, he has lots of quotes from books that he probably read in Latin, and he talks about other people like country folk, which suggests that he doesn't consider himself to be someone, who does farming or whatever themselves, or certainly not someone who's out in the fields doing the farming. Perhaps they owned cows and things like that.
Yes, but it's very interesting because he's also gone out and spoken to those people.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's unsurprising to me, because even though 400 or 500 years ago it was quite a hierarchical society, of course there's lots of interaction between people from different social groups at the same time. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
And I think valuing of different social groups is expertise.
No, indeed. So looking at health,
Yes.
this is of course all nestled in. It's popped up a few times in the podcast so far. Humoral theory, the idea that the humours, the elements affect directly health. So could you tell me how cheese fits into that, or at least how the author thinks cheese fits into that whole theory?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really clear to me that the author sort of knows a lot about humoral theory and has a good understanding of it. And I suppose probably what's most important there is about how humoral theory translates onto the properties of particular foods. So just as human bodies could lean towards being more hot or cold, or more dry or more moist, the same was thought to be the case with food, potentially. The interesting thing about cheese is that it just has one status. So newer cheese that's been produced fairly recently, was thought of as being quite cold and moist. And as it ages, and then you can kind of get a sense of that if you think it through, it's thought to get hotter and drier.
Okay, there's logic there.
Yeah.
I see it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in the sort of food and health humoral framework, there are sort of, I think, two key things that come through in this manuscript. One is the idea of individualized health, so that every person has kind of got a unique body, even if particular groups of people might lean more towards having a particular makeup of the humours. And then second, that you might use food to affect the balance of humours in your body, typically by getting a food to counterbalance whatever might be a bit of a dominant tendency in your body. So if you're sort of inclined to be on the hotter side, it might be a good idea for you to have some colder foods to kind of balance that out, because at the heart of humoral theory is an idea of balance. Really thought that to be in good health, you needed to have a good balance of humours in the body. And if you were unwell, you might be able to correct that, but also preventative dimension, that you wanted to kind of keep an eye on all of this, because that was likely to keep you healthy. And cheese is just one food where that relates to, but this is someone with a real passion for cheese and lots of thoughts about how that might relate to someone's health.
It's so complicated as well, because so many things are affecting it, because it doesn't seem to be just the maturity or the freshness of the cheese. It's how salty the cheese is. It's whether animal rennet's been used or not. It's really complicated stuff that is wading through. And it seems so weird with modern eyes, because we know it's basically all nonsense.
Is it?
Humour thing.
Am
I being controversial?
I would say you are.
Am I?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think if you, I always am very keen to push back on the idea that it was all nonsense. I mean, it's just a way of understanding things.
I suppose.
And I also
yes.
would say that today we definitely don't understand everything. We haven't got it all figured out. We can't fix all the health problems.
Nutrition's just the most difficult science to understand.
Yeah.
That is true.
And I would say that perhaps actually, 400 or 500 years ago, people might be more attuned to what their body might need and benefit from, and being more proactive about that. And perhaps people might have some ideas about it today, but they perhaps aren't implementing it so much in their daily life. At the heart of the sort of humoral ideas around health, diet was thought to be incredibly important. People really cared about their diets. And just because, the language that's used might be around hot and cold or whatever it might be, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad idea to be doing
No, like I
things.
say, you do see the logic sometimes. You understand the conclusion, although the reasoning might not equate to how we think today. That was a much kinder way of saying it, wasn't it?
Yeah, way of thinking
it's
about it.
It's my science background. I'm going to blame it on. And then, of course, there's the actual elements, as it were, of the cheese. The writer identifies the buttery part, the whey part, and then the curd part. And there's a quote here that I really liked. It talks about the watery whey, the buttery fats, and the curds, and that, for in truth, that is very bad cheese that hath all the buttery part taken from it.
Well, yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
so
want the
some-
nice buttery bit in, don't you?
Yeah, you don't want a meager skimmed milk cheese where all the fat's been taken off to make butter, which I suppose is associated with people in farmhouses because the butter's probably what they're selling on or giving to whoever they're renting a farm from. So that has to go to other people. So I guess there's already a bit of a class distinction between those kinds of cheeses, the nice rich buttery ones and the sort of, meager. They call them thin cheeses. I'm never quite sure what they mean because I'm not sure if I've ever actually had one of these cheeses made out of
You just have
skim
the
milk.
good stuff, is that right?
Only the best for me.
Good.
In the pamphlet, what makes a good cheese and what makes a bad cheese? Because it's pretty clear ideas.
Yes,
I
but
think.
also, like you say, a lot of complexity. So I'd say that one of the things that's particularly of interest to this author that they talk about a lot is what kind of milk the cheese was made from.
Yeah.
And I find this really interesting because the way that they talk about it, it seems to be partly based on experience, but partly based on things that they've clearly read in books and that probably actually they've not had any encounter of. And that's really common, I think, from texts from this period, that they often do sort of try to display someone's learning and knowledge and, want to show that they have read all the relevant books, but also has a bit of that practical side of things as well. So in the section that's called Of the Diversity of Milk Used in Making Cheese in This Country, it goes through all kinds of different milk. So women's milk.
Gets a mention. I'm like,
Yep.
I think, if I'm right in remembering, it is to say that cheese has not been made from it.
Not to his
Phew.
knowledge. Not to his knowledge. Yep. And then camel milk, mare's milk, goat's milk, ewe's milk, cow's milk. The author says, I have read that some have used sow's milk to some purposes, and the milk of a bitch taken doth cause a woman to be delivered of her child before time. So what we sort of see from this is a sense that there's a range of different milks that people think you can make cheese from.
Yes.
And then when he goes into more detail, we get a bit of a sense that actually it's only being made from some of these milks. And the one that most commonly was used for making milk in England at this time was cow's milk.
Yes.
And not camel milk. That's reflecting his sort of knowledge and reading of other books.
And what I thought was particularly interesting there was talk of ewe's milk being particularly rich and cheesy. And also, I can't think of the right word, sort of compound milks, mixing milks almost like to create, because they've got all these different properties, so why not mix up the milk?
Exactly, that's the idea behind it. Yeah.
Or a
so
cheese
cow's milk has got particular qualities and benefits, and mare's milk has kind of got other properties, why not mix them? I think there's a question of how much anything in this book is ever done in practice, because this is a kind of theory book ultimately, rather than actually a cookery book. It's not got lots of recipes in it. It's kind of reflecting on the author's knowledge about cheese. So I think we always need to be a little bit skeptical about whether this is actually happening or how much it's actually happening. But I think what it shows is exactly that interest in the different properties and what you might be able to achieve if you mix them together.
Cheese, butter and milk or dairy products are often called white meats, aren't they, in this period? Meat has a slightly different meaning, I suppose, back then. I guess it means sort of substantial, protein-rich food. It doesn't have to be actual meat. But was it considered a meat? The reason I ask is this particular time in history, there's lots of conversation about what you should and should not eat on fasting days and Lent days.
Yes.
And I was wondering if milk at this point, in the Middle Ages, no milk allowed, but things are getting a little bit more relaxed in this period. I was just wondering if it was considered a meat or not.
It's a great
the
question.
early modern period.
I guess it depends on what you're thinking about in terms of meat. In terms of that sort of really nourishing quality to it, that's definitely really prominent in people's minds. And often these treatises and other similar treatises talk about the importance of milk for infants. And of course, that kind of provides complete nutrition for infant children. And so there's a kind of real sense of the value of milk there. I guess in terms of the question of, fasting and so on, obviously in England, we're post-Reformation here. So that's sort of shaping some of those attitudes towards what's appropriate to eat or not appropriate to eat. And I don't think that I don't think dairy products are thought to be necessarily something that need to be avoided on particular days. I think that they're there. The other thing that I think is really relevant, especially when we're thinking about cows, is that agriculturally there's been a significant increase in the number of cows and in the number of cattle.
Oh, right, okay.
In England in the period running up to this. And this also might be a bit of the reason why there's this interest here, because where previously people might have particularly kept pigs, the number of cattle has increased. And so cattle products and dairy products from cows are becoming consumed by a wider number of people just because there's, more availability of it.
See.
Yeah.
So it's just you get more of them on common ground and things. And it seems that there's a very diverse cheese-making culture at this time from the descriptions that our writer has provided. He does talk a little bit about how cheese is made and maybe the origins of cheese, which I quite liked. He kind of supposes what things had to have happened, maybe.
Yes.
And saying that rennet's important, people would make bags out of stomachs and things like that, and maybe just by accident they would have found this. I kind of like that because it's kind of what I thought too. It kind of grounds you with the writer a little bit.
Yes, and there's a lot of talk of rennet throughout the treatise and a lot of talk of salt as well. Cheese can be made in a number of different ways, and I think there's sort of different dimensions to that. One is about actually how long it takes to make it, and the second is about how long it might last for after you've made it. And I think what we're getting over the course of time is an evolution in both of those things. So perhaps a bit of an interest in how to sort of speed up the process, but also an interest in creating cheeses that last for longer rather than cheeses that you just might want to eat within a day or two of them being made, which they would have been consumed, very locally where that was the case, if not just by the people who'd made them, but more of an interest in making cheeses that can be taken to markets or even exported further afield.
Yes, because of course it's the great thing about cheese because it makes milk portable.
Yes,
which it doesn't.
Exactly.
And also it doesn't spoil, or maybe certainly doesn't spoil at the rate fresh milk would do in a time before pasteurisation and all of that kind of stuff. He mentions different kinds of rennet, some vegetable rennet, globe artichokes, I think he mentions. He kind of makes a comparison between those two, but reckons that the rennet from animals is much better. And I feel like he's a little bit of a Goldilocks person. Not too much salt, but not too little salt. Not too much rennet, but not. You got. I guess this is what he's saying.
That's also very in line with humoral theory. That idea of balance.
Right,
there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and trying to find the optimal balance. I guess. Yeah.
Yes, and he's a little mistrustful of mature cheeses compared to fresh ones. He talks about eating mature cheeses, and it kind of engenders, I think it's naughty juices in the stomach, which I guess he means sort of get a bit of an acid stomach or that kind of thing. He does name check a few cheeses.
He does, yes.
Which is nice.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess in line with this exporting of cheeses, then moving around the country, we get regional cheeses, and then people just becoming much more aware of those regional cheeses and the diversity of them, whereas previously they may just have eaten the cheese that was made within their own region. And what we see in England and in Wales as well, which is mentioned quite a few times in this manuscript, is the sort of growth of cheeses that were thought to be particularly good. So Cheshire cheese is often mentioned and is mentioned by this author too, but he's also a big fan of cheese from Banbury.
Yes. It's an extinct cheese, I think, unless maybe there's a farmhouse variety that's going around somewhere these days. But that's, as far as I know, a forgotten
certainly
cheese.
It hasn't got the reputation that it used to. Yes, yeah. And even Cheshire cheese probably is quite different now to what it was then. But yeah, Cheshire cheese had a very wide popularity and was known outside of England as well as a good cheese.
But this is what makes it so interesting because, of course, the people who were making the cheese were usually young women, more often than not illiterate, passing these skills verbally or just by showing for generations and generations. This stuff hasn't been captured. So just knowing what the qualities of the different cheeses are, just describing them by using those adjectives they uses, you get an idea of the cheese. Because there's a lot of people discussing what was the cheese like. We don't really know. You get these little descriptions, but often they're not adequate enough for us to eke these things apart. So I just found it all just so fascinating. Just these little... Just the odd word here and there just increased my own knowledge, my imagination, really, about what the food was like at the time. It's just so amazing.
I think as well, if you are trying to imagine it yourselves, I think it's maybe nice to sort of not just to think about what they might have tasted like, but also what they might have smelled like, what they might have looked like. And actually, the appearance of cheeses was something that mattered a lot to people in this period. So they would, typically be made as wheels, and those wheels were often decorated. And of course, you don't know how far that's just something that's done for something that's valued, or how far it's done to sort of try and market them and make them more attractive to potential buyers. But if you're trying to imagine them, you probably don't just want to sort of think about what cheese looks like if you go to the supermarket today, because it would have been a very different experience in terms of how you bought it and how much you bought and so on.
Yes, and get an idea about how it just fits into the community, what people think of cheese, how it's eaten, even if we don't necessarily know exactly how it's made. Would you say the cheese landscape is sort of similar to maybe what France is today or something, where there's just extremely local cheeses that don't necessarily travel very far, that are just known to the community?
I'm not sure it's even so different to England today. Obviously we have lots of cheeses that are mass produced and sold in supermarkets, but there are also a lot of artisanal cheesemakers.
Well, yes, you're right, actually, yes.
Often, making recipes that date quite some time back, though I think, as my understanding is that a lot of those recipes either date back to the 20th century or at best into the 19th century. So I think you've got a lot of diversity of cheese. And I think there still is that diversity of cheeses in England today. And you might actually sort of say, even though we might have a sense of the range of cheeses that there are in France, actually a lot of French people are eating quite a small number of very popular types of cheese there as well. Yeah. So I just think there's that interest in variety and that interest in regionality. And of course that the difference in those regional cheeses, it's not just about the way in which cheese is made, but it's also about the nature of the milk and how that's affected by the environment. So the altitude, what the animals are eating, are things that can really affect, the quality of the milk and then how the cheese comes out of that.
I suppose my question's a bit out of date. If I was saying this in the 1980s, when there were the farmhouse cheese movement wasn't here.
Yeah.
Yes, I see what you mean. No, it's so nice to have it back. And yes, a lot of these farmhouse cheesemakers have gone to France to fill in their gaps in their knowledge and things. Yeah. But again, these sorts of pamphlets, although there's not anything even approaching a recipe, you know what you're looking for. At least there's descriptions of the end product.
Absolutely.
So at least you can try and maneuver your cheese to maybe fit how it's described.
Yeah. But what I think this author is interested in is not just the making of cheese, but also eating it. And I do think that's one of the things that I find most interesting about this manuscript, because, he's got a lot of views on, when you should eat cheese, what kind of cheese you should eat, how much of it you should eat. So there's the kind of making side of it, and then there's also the consuming side of it, I think is really prominent too.
And one thing that really leapt out to me, actually, talking about consuming cheese, is that he notices that despite being cheese delicious and good for you, as long as it's eaten at the right time of day, you're not eating too much of it and it's not too old, he notices that for some people, cheese is a no-no. Which I thought was really interesting, because we talk about food intolerance and things these days.
Absolutely, and it probably does reflect that. I mean, I think there's also the kind of preference thing, but I think that's also really, strongly the case today, that some people could eat cheese and they'd be absolutely fine, but they just really don't like it. And
well, there is that too, yes.
Yeah, so I think it's both of those things, that he's kind of, really interested that some people love it, some people hate it, and that for some people it just does not agree with their body, however much care you might take with it. And that really goes back to that idea of the humoral body being different for each person. So it's the same sort of thing, that cheese suits some people and cheese doesn't suit other people. It's just different language. So we'd use the languages of intolerance, and they would have used the language of the humoral body.
I liked the little sentence, some do utterly abhor cheese. Yes, the cheese haters. But I did think it was interesting, because he does seem to be trying to weigh this poser up in his head. It's like, how can it be so healthful for some people, and yet it's making other people sick.
Yeah, and I think it may also sort of tie into some of the reflections that that there are both in this text and in other texts about different kinds of people, not necessarily different individuals. And say, for example, eating cheese as a child, eating cheese as a sort of working age adult, and eating cheese as an older adult. We know with intolerance that often that gets worse over the course of someone's life. Or equally, we know that some infants can have a milk intolerance, and that can improve. So I think there's also kind of a sense that these things aren't static and that can potentially change. And actually, one kind of cheese might be okay for you when you're younger, and another kind might be okay for you when you're older. And some of the modern research into dairy suggests that actually some kinds of milk have less lactose in and so are less problematic for people who are lactose intolerant. And that might also relate to some of the discussion about different animals and goats and different cheeses made out of different milks as well, I think, in this text.
Well, getting close to wrapping up, is there anything actually that we've not talked about that you think is really important that I've missed or forgotten to ask you?
Well, I do. I mean, I know I've talked about it previously, but I do find it really interesting about the when you should eat cheese and where it sort of fits into the sequence of your meals. So the belief was that you should eat your cheese either at the beginning or at the end of a meal, but probably best of all at the end of a meal, because it was thought to close the stomach. And I think that's quite interesting because it kind of gets you thinking a bit about how people don't just sort of put something in their mouth and sort of think no further about it. They're sort of thinking about which parts of the body it's interacting with and how it's affecting them there. And of course, relates to some modern cultural practices like eating cheese at the end of meals. And the reason that people at this time suggested that you do it was for health reasons. And I think it's become more of a kind of cultural practice now, sort of just the way you do things. And it's interesting to think that could be the origins of that practice for me.
When you first start looking into food history, you really look at the weird and wacky stuff and you think, oh, this is crazy, the food that people eat. But you get over that quite quickly. And the things that really leap out to you are the threads that haven't changed. And it's things like that like you've described, like the eating the cheese at the end of the meal. So that's been going on for at least mid-16th century or whatever. Those are so pleasing, those kind of little facts. And they always, it's like a little dopamine hit when you come across them. You're like, oh, it's nice to know we still do that.
It is, and it's nice to kind of feel connected to all those people back in the past, isn't it? So, because the past isn't a totally foreign country, it is something that we've got connections with today.
No, and again, that's why I like the food history, because, you can go get a recipe. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same, but you can get pretty close, I think, and you can be a bit more immersive, especially if it's difficult for you to try and imagine these things. You can actually try and get some cheese recipes or recipes that use cheese. Just things like cheese and honey was very common and things like that, and pistachio nuts, little things like that, which I guess we might have now for our breakfast.
Yeah,
things that people are still eating, these little combinations of things. It's just all so good.
And those combinations are also often about that balance thing. So you kind of, you have one food that balances out with another food. So something that may be a bit sour balanced out with something sweet like honey. And that's creating that balance, which is just really thought to be optimal for your body.
Yeah, people are using logic and what feels right and what feels wrong. Like we were saying before, they're coming to similar conclusions, even though maybe the science bit isn't quite what we think of today, but it can still, just by a gut feeling, no pun intended, a gut feeling kind of tells you, helps you understand, what's good for you and bad for you in particular. So it's just nice to see these things there, written down in slightly different ways, but they're still there. It's nice.
It's nice to see people enthusiastic about food, I think, as well. And like I said earlier, I think that this guy was just really passionate about cheese. He just writes pages and pages and pages about it. It's a really long text. And I think he just had a lot to say and he wanted to bring it all together in one place.
And he's done his reading to back it all up.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you do get a lot of text where people are just assuming quite a lot of stuff. So he's been doing his reading.
Though I would say he could also approach some of his reading with a more critical eye.
Oh dear, okay. I have to admit, I haven't read much Galen, so...
well, I think, Galen's still massively influential, actually way past the time that this text was written. But if I just read a little bit out, to show the goodness of cheese in the gout, Galen writeth a long story, not unpleasant to be recited here of a time, saith he, a cheese made of cow's milk was given me, and I perceiving by the smell that it was very tart and sharp, did leave it as not to be eaten, and a long time after my men asked me what I would have done with it when I had thought they had eaten it, and then perceiving the same for tartness and sharpness not fit to be eaten, I considered to what use I might put it, and while I was in this meditation, behold, a man greatly troubled with the gout was brought to my house in a coach or wagon, having his joints full of knobs or knots. It came in my mind to macerate that old cheese with the decoction concoction of fat bacon, and to beat the same well in a mortar, and so to lay it to his knotted joints, which done, that man was greatly eased of the gout. So, this is something that's kind of being reported, and it may, of course, be something that works, but it is just a story that he's telling and retelling rather than something that actually we necessarily think happened. So I think he's sometimes including these stories, just for, a bit of entertainment there rather than actually because he's sort of got any proof from his own experience that actually this works.
I see. Mixed bag. References wise.
Yes.
Can folk see the pamphlet online quite easily? Is it readily available?
Absolutely, yes. If you put in cheese University of Leeds, probably you'll find in a search engine that it will take you to the place where you can see it. You can look for it specifically on the University of Leeds' Cultural Collections and Galleries website.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure people will be checking it out. And there's that transcription, of course.
Absolutely, which we've also got a link to on our website to make it as easy as possible for people to find it. And we hope you enjoy reading it. That's the joy of sharing these things, that more and more people can look at these texts, get ideas about them, share them, and we can just keep talking about it.
No, it's been so fascinating. It's been great talking to you and to meet you as well. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Alex. And a big thank you too to Roland Thomas, librarian at the Brotherton, for organising a time for us to meet and to view the pamphlet at the library. There are links in the show notes so that you can read the pamphlet yourself, and there's a link to the Brotherton Library website. But please do go to the blog where you'll find an accompanying post which has got some photographs on there from mine and Alex's interview in the reading room of that library. There's also links to previous pertinent podcast episodes, such as Cheddar and the Cheese Industry with Peter J. Atkins and Tudor Food and Cuisine with Brigitte Webster. Hey, but let's talk a bit of exciting news. Now, the Servitforth Food History Festival will be online and on the 18th of October, so it's gradually moving closer. It's all being organised by Sam Bilton, Thomas Dinas, Alessandra Pino and me, and I said I would let you know who my guest is helping us kick off the day. Now here's my description of the event. Neil Buttery is kicking off the day in conversation with a very special guest about their love of traditional and classic British cooking and how we can keep it alive and relevant today. We'll also be taking a peek at the food cooked and enjoyed by British monarchs, from Queen Victoria to Charles III. Now, we're going to be making announcements online as to all the guests for the festival, so make sure you're following on socials. That's all in the show notes. But my guest will be, imaginary drumroll please, food writer and lover of traditional food, Tom Parker Bowles. I'm very excited. Now, tickets are available via Eventbrite. Tickets are £16, but at the moment there is that early bird special of 25% off the ticket price. But be quick, because early bird offers don't last forever. Links are in the show notes. By the way, ticket holders who can't make it live, or maybe can't make for the whole day, don't worry, you will be able to access the recordings soon after the day's done. Yeah, I'm so pleased that Tom's agreed to do this. So please support me, him, and the festival. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, more news. On the blog, a post for everyone to read, my recipe for Jervis Markham's white pudding, or my interpretation of it anyway, with a bit of white pudding history thrown in. And also remember, my book, The Philosophy of Puddings, is out now and looks at the history of puddings from antiquity to the present day. Subscribers, remember to look out for the junket recipe, which will be arriving between now and the next episode coming out. It's a rather forgotten dessert and considered a bit weird these days, but I think junkets are really good. Junket making is also the first stage of cheese making, so I thought it marries up very well with today's episode. If you can, please support the podcast and blog financially by donating a one-off virtual coffee or pint, or start up a £3 monthly subscription Thank you to everyone who's done that. Go to britishfoodhistory.com and click on the Support the Blog and Podcast tab. Subscribers get access to the secret podcast, my Easter eggs page, bonus blog posts, such as the Junket post, a monthly newsletter, and first dibs on special events. But of course, there's all sorts of other ways to support, so please carry on spreading the word, leaving positive reviews and ratings. 5-star ratings, please, if that's okay. But also retweeting, joining in with conversations on social media. All these things make it all interactive and gets more people interested. If you have any comments, questions or queries regarding this or any other episode, please contact me or leave a message on social media. Send me your thoughts about this episode. Have you done any cheese making yourself? It's all a bit like witchcraft if you ask me. I really need to have a go at doing some. So email me, neil@britishfoodhistory.com, or find me on social media. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky @NeilButtery, or Instagram and Threads as Doctor, that's Dr_Neil_Buttery. Episodes are on YouTube, of course, so leave a comment there. Or post on the Facebook discussion page, which is at facebook.com/groups/British Food History, or on the Spotify app. The mixing and sound engineering was done by Thomas Dinas of the Delicious Legacy podcast. Please do check it out. He's done a recent episode on Palestinian food, culture and identity. Angela Zeher was his guest on that. It's well worth a listen. But for me, it's time to go. Until next time, I shall see you soon. Cheerio.